He did not touch her. He did not have to. He simply looked at her the way a man looks at a door he has already decided to walk through. And she understood that whatever politeness this was, it had a short life. "Get in," he told her. "Someone needs to see you before the wrong people find you first." And it was that last part, the wrong people, that made her cold in a way the rain had not. Because it meant there were sides. It meant that after 7 years of silence, the thing she had seen in that room, the thing she had promised herself she had imagined, was real enough that men were being sent to stand between her and it. She got in the car. Her hands would not stay still in her lap, so she pressed them flat against her thighs and made them behave. Outside the window, her small, ordinary street slid away and did not come back. She did not know yet that the old man who had once saved her family was dead. She did not know that his son had buried him that same morning, with dry eyes and a jaw like a locked door. She did not know that somewhere across the city, a man named Baek Sung-ho was smiling at a folder that could erase an entire empire, and that the only thing standing between that folder and its purpose was one memory, 7 years old, sitting in the back of a black car with flour on her arms. She only knew that she had spent 7 years trying to forget one night, and that the night, it seemed, had never once forgotten her. Yoon Jae-hyun was waiting when the car came up the long private drive, and the lady's first thought, before fear, before anything, was that grief had made him beautiful and terrible in equal measure. He stood at the top of the stone steps in unrelieved black, the collar of his coat turned up, his hands loose at his sides in the way of a man who has learned that stillness frightens people more than movement ever could. He watched the car stop. He watched the door open. He watched her climb out, awkward on the gravel, and he did not come down to meet her. He simply looked at her across that distance, as if he were reading something written on her a long time ago, in a language he had only just been handed the key to. "You are the girl," he said, "from that night." It was not a welcome. It was almost an accusation. Naledi lifted her chin. She had learned a long time ago that the fastest way to lose a room was to look at the floor while you were in it. "I am nobody," she said. "Your men made a mistake." Something moved at the corner of his mouth that was not a smile. "My father did not make mistakes about people," he said, "and he made none about you. So you will forgive me if I trust his judgment over your modesty." The wind pulled at her coat. She held the ground under her feet and did not let him see the effect the words had, because he had said, "my father," in the past tense, and the past tense had landed in her chest like a stone dropped down a deep well. "He is gone," she said. It was not a question. She had already understood. For the first time, the man at the top of the steps went very still, stiller than before, and she watched the grief pass behind his eyes, the way weather passes behind a window, there and then locked away. "This morning," he said. "We put him in the ground this morning." And by this afternoon, there were already men trying to take apart everything he built before his body was even cold. He turned then, and the turn was an order. "Come inside. What I have to say to you is not for the gravel." She should have refused. Every careful year she had spent making herself small told her to refuse. But under all of it was the other thing, the debt, the memory of her father on his knees in their emptied house 7 years ago, weeping with relief because a stranger had lifted a mountain off his back and asked for nothing. That debt had a name now, and its name was dead, and its son was standing in front of her, asking her to walk through a door. She walked through the door, and for the length of a single breath the present fell away, and she was 17 again, standing in the doorway of a house that no longer had furniture in it. 7 years ago, the Zawadi home had been stripped to the walls. Men had come with clipboards and taken the piano, the paintings, the good chairs, the rugs her mother had carried across an ocean, until the rooms echoed, and her father, Baraka Zawadi, a man who had never in her life bowed his head to anyone, sat on the bare floor of his own emptied study with his face in his hands. She remembered the smell of that house without its things, dust and cold plaster and the sour edge of a proud man's fear. She remembered thinking that shame had a smell and that she would know it anywhere for the rest of her life. And then the old man had come. Yoon Sang-chul, silver at the temples, quiet as a closed book, moving through their ruined house as if ruin did not frighten him. He had spoken to her father, alone in that stripped study with the door not quite shut, and Naledi, 17 and terrified and unable to help herself, had stood in the hall and watched through the gap. She had seen a thing pass between the two men that she had spent 7 years telling herself she had misread. Not the exchange of money. Money would have made sense. What she saw was older than money and heavier than gratitude. And when her father finally looked up, he was not the broken man who had sat down. He was afraid in a wholly different way. The way a man is afraid when he has been handed a secret he never wanted to hold. By the next morning, every debt was cleared. The men with clipboards never came back, and Sang-chul had asked for nothing. Nothing at all, except one thing he said to Naledi directly on his way out the door. So quietly her father never heard it. "What you saw in that room," he had told her, "you did not see. Not for my sake, for yours." She had kept that promise for 7 years. She had kept it so well she had almost convinced herself there had never been anything to keep. Standing now in the dead man's house, she understood, with a slow, cold certainty, that the promise had come due. Inside, the house was all dark wood and low amber light, and the particular hush of a place where money had been quiet for generations. He did not offer her a seat. He crossed to a long window that looked out over the black shape of the garden and spoke to the glass, not to her. "There is a man named Baek Sung-ho," he said. "For 20 years he waited in my father's shadow and smiled and called himself a friend. My father is not 2 days dead, and Sung-ho has already filed the thing he has been building the whole time. A case. An inquiry that, if it lands, does not fine us and does not embarrass us. It ends us. Every name, every door, every person who has ever stood under the Yoon roof, gone." He turned from the window and looked at her, and for the first time, the coldness cracked just far enough for her to see the exhaustion underneath it. "And the entire thing," he said, "the whole empire my father spent his life building comes down to one night 7 years ago. One room, one witness." He came across the floor toward her slowly, deliberately, until there was nothing polite left in the distance between them. "You," he said, "are the witness. You saw what happened in that room, and you are the only living person who can either save us with the truth or bury us with your silence." Naledi's heart was going so hard now she was certain he could hear it. "If I saw anything," she said carefully, "why would I have kept quiet about it for 7 years?" "Because my father asked you to," Jae-hyun said, "and you owed him." He watched her face when he said it, watched the flinch she could not fully hide, and something in his own expression shifted, as if a suspicion he had carried in had just been confirmed. "I thought so," he said, quieter now. "He was not wrong about you." "And if I say no," she asked, "if I walk back out to that gravel and go home and forget I was ever here?" "Then Sung-ho's people will find you by morning," he said, without cruelty, which somehow made it worse. "Because he cannot afford for you to be alive to tell the truth, any more than I can afford for you to stay silent. You stopped being nobody the moment my father died, Naledi. You are the most dangerous person in this city now, and the only argument is which side of it you spend that danger on. If you have made it this far, if some part of you is already leaning toward this woman standing in a dead man's house with flower still on her arms, then you already understand exactly what this channel is for. This is Afro-Korean Love Tales Hub, where the love stories are dangerous and the people caught inside them have everything to lose. Subscribing is how you tell us this kind of story is landing, that the hours poured into it were worth it, and it is the one thing that lets us keep bringing them to you. Do that now, and stay close, because what she is about to learn changes everything she thought she owed this family. Naledi stood very still in the amber light and made herself breathe. She had come into this house believing she carried a debt. She was beginning to understand she carried something far heavier than a debt. She carried the only version of the truth that mattered, and every powerful man in this city was about to come looking for it. "I need to sit down," she said. Jae-hyun pulled out a chair for her himself, and that small thing, the head of a dying empire crossing a room to move a chair for a baker's daughter, undid something in her that all his cold certainty had not. She did not go home that night. There was a moment, sitting in that carved chair, with a glass of water she had not asked for cooling between her hands, when she almost stood up and walked back out to the gravel on principle alone. But then Jae-hyun set his phone on the table between them, face up, and let her see the photograph on the screen. It was her street. It was her bakery. It was the front door she had locked 2 hours earlier, and standing outside it, unhurried, was a man in a grey coat, looking directly up at the camera, as if he had known someone would be watching. "That is one of Sung-ho's," Jae-hyun said. "He was there within 40 minutes of my men collecting you. 40 minutes, Naledi. Ask yourself how he knew where to look so fast." She stared at the grey coat and the familiar door, and felt the last of her small, ordinary life close like a book. "If I stay here," she said, "I am admitting I am worth hiding." "You are worth hiding, whether you admit it or not," he said. "The only question left is whether you would like to survive the admission." So she stayed. A silent woman showed her to a room on the 3rd floor that was larger than her entire apartment, with a bed she was afraid to sit on and a window that did not open. She stood in the middle of all that borrowed luxury in her flour-dusted clothes and understood that a gilded cage is still the thing with bars. The man called Oh Jun-ho was the one who brought her clothes the next morning. He was younger than she expected, lean and quiet, with careful eyes that catalogued a room before they ever settled on a face. And he set the folded garments on the end of the bed with the neatness of a man who did everything precisely. He had been Jae-hyun since they were boys, she would learn. He was the closest thing the Empire had to a brother of the blood, and he watched over Jae-hyun the way a man watches over the one thing he cannot afford to lose. "You do not trust me," Naledi said, because it was obvious, and she was tired of pretending not to notice things. Jun-ho considered her for a long moment. "I do not trust anything my employer needs this badly," he said at last. "Needing a person is how men like us get killed." Then he inclined his head, almost an apology, and left her alone with the clothes and the sentence. And she turned the sentence over for a long time after the door had shut. "Needing a person is how men like us get killed." She wondered whether he had meant it as a warning about Jae-hyun or about her. They let her make one call. Jun-ho stood in the doorway with his flat, careful eyes while she dialed, and she understood without being told that if she said one wrong word, the call would end. And so, perhaps, would other things. Ayana Kone picked up on the second ring, and the sound of her best friend's voice nearly took Naledi's knees out from under her. Ayana, who had helped her paint the bakery, who knew nothing about the Yoons or a room 7 years ago, who lived in the ordinary daylight world Naledi had just been lifted out of, like a fish out of water. "Where are you?" Ayana said, and there was fear already in it. "The bakery is dark. Your phone went to nothing for a whole day." The woman who runs the flower shop said she saw men outside. "I am fine," Naledi said, and hated the lie for how smooth it came out. "I had to go away for a little while. Family. It is complicated and it is boring, and I promise you it is nothing. Naledi. Ayana's voice dropped, low and certain, the voice of a woman who had known her for a decade. You have never in your life had family business you did not complain to me about for 3 hours. Tell me the truth. Are you in trouble? Naledi looked up. Junho was watching her. Beyond him, at the end of the hall, Jaehyun had appeared in a doorway and gone very still, listening, and she felt the weight of both men waiting to hear what she would give away. No, she said softly into the phone. I am not in trouble. I just needed to disappear for a while. You understand? She did not understand. Naledi could hear it. But Ayana, who loved her, let her have the lie. And that was somehow the loneliest part of all of it. The days took on the texture of a held breath. She was not allowed to leave. She was not precisely a prisoner either. She was something in between, a secret being kept alive, and the keeping of it filled the great quiet house with a tension that hummed under everything. Jaehyun came to her in the evenings. He would sit across from her in the amber study and ask her in 100 careful different ways the same single question. What did you see in that room? And 100 careful different ways she did not answer it. Not because she was protecting him. She told herself that clearly every night, so she would not begin to believe otherwise. She was protecting the promise, the old man's low voice at the door. You did not see, for yours. She had built 7 years of survival on the foundation of that silence, and she did not know how to take a stone out of it without the whole structure coming down. You are stubborn, Jaehyun said on the 4th night, not unkindly. I am alive, she answered. The two have always been the same thing for me. Something in his face changed when she said that. For a moment, the Mafia boss was gone, and there was only a tired man who had buried his father 4 days ago and was watching everything that father built slide toward a cliff. My father chose to protect you, he said quietly, at the cost of a secret that has now nearly cost me the empire. I have spent 4 days hating him for it, and then I look at you refusing to break, keeping his instruction even now, even scared, even cornered. And I begin to understand what he saw. He leaned forward, and the amber light caught the exhaustion in his eyes. He did not save your family, Naledi. He recruited it. He just did it so gently that none of you ever felt the hook go in. The word hook sat in her chest all night. On the 6th day, they came for her. It happened fast, the way real violence always does, nothing like the slow dread she had been living inside. She was in the 3rd floor room when she heard the first sound that did not belong, a soft, heavy thud 2 floors down, then another, then the particular silence that is louder than any noise. She was on her feet before she had decided to be. The door opened and it was Junho, and there was blood on his sleeve that was not his, and his careful eyes had gone flat and terrible. Behind me, he said, now, do not make a sound. She learned later that 4 men had come over the south wall in the dark, that they had not come to take her and had not come to frighten her, that they had come with the specific economical intention of making sure she could never testify to anything ever again. She learned that Junho had put down 2 of them in the service corridor before either understood he was there. She did not see any of that. What she saw was Jaehyun. He came around the corner of the landing with a gun held low and easy in one hand, and his shirt open at the collar, and something in his face she had no name for. And when his eyes found her, whole, unhurt, standing white and shaking behind Junho, the something in his face broke open for half a second into pure, naked relief before he shut it away again. He did not ask if she was hurt, He crossed the landing and took her face in his free hand, one blunt, cold thumb against her cheek, and looked at her the way a man looks at the single thing he came back for. And his voice, when it came, was very low and very rough. "They will not touch you," he said. "Do you understand me? Not while I am breathing. I do not care what it costs." And the lady, who had spent 7 years making herself too small to be worth anyone's cost, felt the dangerous warmth of being suddenly, ferociously worth something to a man who could end a life with the hand that was cradling her face, and hated how much of her leaned toward it. If you are still here, still awake in the dark with these two, hands maybe pressed to your mouth, then do one thing for me before you go on. Drop the emoji that matches exactly how this moment is sitting in your chest right now. Whatever it is, do not overthink it. And tell me where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are. Because I genuinely want to know who is out there holding their breath for a baker's daughter and a dangerous man tonight. Then stay close, because the person who sent those 4 men over the wall is not finished, and the next thing he sends will not come over a wall at all. They moved her that same night to a place with no address. It was a house on the water an hour outside the city, low and dark and half swallowed by pine. The kind of house a careful man keeps for the day the careful plans fail. There were no staff. There was only Junho and Jaehyun and the lady, and the sound of the black water moving against the dock in the dark. And in that smaller, closer quiet, with the danger no longer a photograph on a phone, but the memory of blood on a sleeve, the careful distance she had been keeping from Yoon Jaehyun began, night by night, to fail. She found him on the dock the second night, not sleeping, a glass in his hand that he was not drinking from, staring out at the black water as if it owed him an answer. "You should be inside," he said without turning. "So should you." He almost smiled at that. She came and stood beside him at the rail, close enough that she could feel the cold coming off the water and the different warmth coming off him. And for a while, neither of them said anything, and the silence was not a weapon for once, but something closer to shelter. "I keep thinking," he said finally, "that he knew he was going to die. My father, that he set all of this in motion, you, the promise, the timing, everything, like a man arranging the board before he leaves the room." He turned his head and looked at her in the dark. "What did he tell you, Naledi? Not what you saw, what did he say to you?" And this time, standing on a dock over black water with the cold in her bones and the memory of his thumb on her cheek still warm, she almost told him. She got as far as opening her mouth, and then her eyes caught something over his shoulder, back at the dark house. A small wrong light where no light should be. The brief blue glow of a phone screen held low behind a window, by someone who was supposed to be asleep. It was there, and then it was gone, and a cold that had nothing to do with the water went straight down her spine. Because there were only 3 people in this house, and 2 of them were standing on the dock. She closed her mouth. She said nothing at all about the room 7 years ago. Instead, she said, very quietly, "Does Junho ever sleep?" Jaehyun frowned. "Why?" "No reason," she said, and made herself smile, and felt the first thread of a much larger and much colder fear begin to pull tight somewhere under her ribs. Because if the leak that had handed Baek Sung-ho his empire-killing case had come from inside the Yoon walls, then it had walked into this house on the water with them. And it was awake. And it was watching. And she had almost just told it everything. She began to watch the house instead of sleeping. It was a small, quiet, exhausting kind of vigilance. She learned the sounds of the safe house the way she had once learned the sounds of the bakery ovens. Which board in the hall announced a footstep, how the pines moved against the roof when the wind came off the water, the exact pitch of the old pipes at 3 in the morning. and she learned the two men in it. Junho slept in a narrow room off the kitchen, with the door open and one shoe on, always, as if half of him never went under. Jaehyun did not seem to sleep at all, and somewhere in that watching, she stopped being able to tell which fear was keeping her awake, the fear of the thing hunting her, or the fear of the man she kept finding reasons to stand next to, because the standing next to him had become a problem. It started with the small, unbearable things. His hand at the base of her spine, guiding her through a doorway, gone before she could decide whether to lean into it. The way he learned, without being asked, that she took her coffee too sweet, and simply made it that way one grey morning and set it in front of her without a word. The evening he found her turning a ball of dough she had asked Junho to buy the flour for, just to have something in her hands that made sense, and he stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her work the way other men watched fire, and said nothing, and did not leave. "You are staring," she told him, not looking up. "I have never seen you unafraid," he said. "I wanted to see how long it would last." She looked up then, flour to her elbows, and caught him with his careful armour all the way down, and for one long, dangerous moment, neither of them pretended. "It cannot happen," she said quietly. "Whatever this is, you need my testimony. That makes anything between us a transaction, and I have spent my whole life being the thing men needed. I will not do it again with you." Jaehyun crossed the kitchen slowly. He did not touch her. He stopped close enough that she had to tip her head back to hold his eyes, and his voice, when it came, was low and stripped of everything but the truth. "If I only needed your testimony," he said, "I would have let Junho frighten it out of you on the first night and sent you home. I have wanted to keep you since the second I saw you climb out of that car and refuse to be afraid of me. The empire is my inheritance." He lifted one hand and, very carefully, brushed a streak of flour from her cheekbone with his thumb. The same thumb, the same place. "You are the only thing I have wanted that my father did not hand me." She should have stepped back. She kissed him instead, or he kissed her, or the distance simply stopped existing the way it had been threatening to for days, and it was nothing like a transaction. It was the flour and the cold water beyond the window, and 7 years of being small, all coming undone at once. His hands framed her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing house. She felt the exact moment his control slipped, the low sound he made against her mouth, the way he pulled her fully against him, as if some starving part of him had been waiting years for permission. And she let herself, for the length of that kiss, be a woman who was wanted, rather than a woman who was needed. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers and breathed like a man who had run a long way. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed, and did not let her go. The mistake did not stay small. Over the next days, the safe house became a country with two climates, the cold vigilance she still carried against the unseen leak, and the reckless warmth that kept pulling her back toward him whenever the fear let her go. They did not speak of the testimony. They did not speak of the future, which neither of them believed in. They stole a life in the margins of a siege, and the lady understood, even as she let it happen, that she was doing the one thing Junho had warned her against on the first morning. She was letting herself need someone. And needing a person, he had said, was how people like them got killed. There was one night she let herself stop counting the exits. It was raining, the hard, slanting rain that came off the water in sheets, and the power had gone out somewhere down the dark road. And for a few hours, the safe house was lit only by the fire Jaehyun built in the stone hearth with his own hands, sleeves pushed up, a side of him she had not seen. They sat on the floor in front of it with a bottle of something old he had found in the cellar, and the storm made the whole rest of the world feel very far away, and briefly impossible to reach. He talked that night, more than he ever had. He told her about a boy who had grown up in the long, cold shadow of Yun Sang-chul, who had learned to read a room before he could read a book, who had spent his whole life trying to be hard enough to deserve an empire he was not sure he wanted. He told her his father had never once said he loved him, and had died without saying it, and that the not saying was a wound Naledi recognized instantly, because her own father had said it too much, as if the words could refill an emptied house. The firelight moved over her, over the loose drape of the old sweater she wore against the cold, over the full, soft curve of her, where she sat with her knees drawn up. And Jae-hyun looked at her the way a man looks at warmth he does not believe he is allowed to keep. "I do not know how to do this," he admitted into the dark. "Want a person and protect an empire. My father made it look like one thing. For me, they are pulling in two directions, and you are standing in the middle of the pull." "Then stop pulling," she said softly, and reached across the space between them, and for that one storm-drowned night, they let themselves believe the world outside the fire did not exist. The net tightened on a Thursday. Ayana's message came through on the single monitored phone they let Naledi keep, and Naledi knew before she opened it that something was wrong, because Ayana never used her full name. "Naledi Zawadi," it read. "A man came to the bakery today asking when you would be back. He was very polite. He knew my name. He knew my mother's name. He asked me to give you a message, that Mr. Beck sends his regards and hopes you will do the reasonable thing." "Naledi, who is Mr. Beck? What have you gotten into? I'm scared." Naledi's hands went cold around the phone. She found Jae-hyun in the study and put the screen in front of him without a word, and she watched something happen to his face that she had not seen before. Not the cold, not the grief, but a killing stillness that made the room feel smaller. He read it twice. When he looked up, his eyes had gone almost black. "He went to your friend," Jae-hyun said very softly. "He put his hand near a person you love to move you." He was quiet for a moment, and the quiet was worse than shouting. "Give me her address." "No," Naledi said. "You will not turn Ayana into a piece on your board too. She is the only clean thing left in my life." "Then help me keep her clean," he said. And there was the possessiveness she had felt on the landing, grown teeth now, aimed outward. "Seung-ho has just told us exactly what he will do. He will reach through everyone you have ever loved until you either testify his way or stop being able to testify at all." He came around the desk and took her by the shoulders, not roughly, but with a grip that would not be argued with. "I can put people around Ayana tonight, quietly. She will never know they are there. But you have to let me protect what you love, Naledi. Because he already knows it is the fastest way to break you, and he is right." She let him. God help her, she let him, and hated that the safest thing for the person she loved most was to hand her to the Mafia. And that night, unable to sleep, sick with the nearness of the danger, she finally did the thing she had been circling for a week. She went looking for the leak. She told herself it was for Ayana. Someone in this house had told Seung-ho where she was within 40 minutes, had perhaps told him about the bakery, about Ayana, about all of it. If she could find the crack, she could seal it, and the people she loved would be safer. So while the house slept its one-shoe sleep, Naledi moved through the dark rooms in her socked feet, with her heart in her throat. And she did the thing that would not let her turn back once it was done. She stood outside his door for a long time before she made herself move. The hallway was black, except for the faint grey where the storm-cleared moon came through the far window, and the floor was cold through her socks, and every board she trusted her weight to seemed to consider giving her away. She could hear her own pulse. She kept thinking of the phrase she had turned over for a week now. Needing a person is how men like us get killed. And she could not decide anymore whether the man who had said it had been confessing something or warning her about himself. That was the terrible arithmetic of a leak inside a house. It made you suspect the people keeping you alive. It turned every kindness into possible evidence and every closed door into a question. Part of her wanted to turn around. Part of her wanted to climb back into the borrowed warmth of the last few days and pretend she had never seen a blue glow behind a window, never felt the thread pull tight under her ribs, never begun to count which of them had a reason. But Ayana's message sat in her chest like a stone. A man came to the bakery today. He knew my mother's name. And the lady had spent 7 years being the person things happened to. She was done being that person. If there was a crack in this house, she would find it herself, with her own 2 hands, tonight, whatever it cost her to know. So she breathed once, slow and shaking, and she stepped inside. She searched Junho's room. It was almost bare, as she had expected. A soldier's room, nothing personal, nothing soft. But under the mattress, wrapped in an oilcloth with the care of a man hiding the one object that mattered, she found a second phone. Not the work phone he carried openly, a small, cheap thing, cold in her hand. And when she woke, the screen there was no passcode, and there was exactly one conversation thread on it, and the number at the top had no name. She read the last message that had been sent from Junho's hidden phone. She is at the waterhouse. He does not sleep near her. 3rd room, dockside. It is soft here now. If it is going to be done, it should be done before he can no longer give the order himself. Naledi stood in the dark with the phone shaking in her hand and the black water breathing against the dock outside, and understood that she had found it. The brother of the blood. The one shoe. The man who did not trust anything his employer needed this badly. It had been Junho all along, feeding her position, her habits, the softening of the boss, straight to the man who wanted them all dead. And then, behind her, from the doorway she had left open, a voice she knew said her name, very quietly, and it was not Junho's voice. It was Jaehyun's. And he was looking at the phone in her hand with an expression she could not read at all. "Put it down," Jaehyun said. Naledi did not put it down. Her whole body had gone to ice, and her mind was running very fast and very cold, and the only clear thought in it was that she was standing in the traitor's room, holding the proof, and the man in the doorway loved that traitor like a brother, and she did not know which of them she was about to have to survive. "It is Junho," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "He has a second phone. He has been telling Sung-ho where I sleep, what I do, that you have gone soft. Read it. Read it yourself, it is right here." Something crossed Jaehyun's face that she had braced for rage and did not find. He came into the room without hurry, took the cheap phone from her frozen hand and read the message. And when he lifted his eyes to hers again, there was no shock in them at all, only a terrible tiredness, and something that might, in a better life, have been grief. "I know," he said quietly. The floor tilted under her. "You know." "I gave the order," Jaehyun said. For a moment she could not make the words mean anything. She stood in the dark room with the water breathing outside and stared at the man she had kissed in front of a fire 2 nights ago, and felt the whole shape of the last weeks turn over and show her its other face. Junho appeared in the doorway then, silent as ever, one shoe on, his careful eyes moving between the two of them and the phone, and understanding everything in a single sweep. He did not look guilty. He looked, if anything, sorry. "Not for Sung-ho," Junho said to her, gently, as if to a child standing too near a road. "The number belongs to Sung-ho, yes, but the messages are lies. Every one. My father," and he glanced at Jaehyun and corrected himself with the ease of a lifetime, "his father, left instructions for exactly this. If the empire were ever attacked from inside the law, we were to feed the attacker a version of the truth, wrong in the ways that mattered, until he committed to a move we could break. I have been the leak on purpose. I have been handing Baek Sung-ho a poisoned map for 3 weeks. That message tells him you are unguarded on the dockside tonight, because the dockside is where we want him to come. The room rearranged itself around Naledi a second time. You used yourselves as bait, she said. You used me as bait. We used the appearance of you, Jae-hyun said, not you. He set the phone down on the bare dresser and looked at her, and now the tiredness had a crack in it, and through the crack she could see how much the next part cost him. I needed you to believe it too. If you knew the leak was ours, your fear would not have looked real, and Sung-ho reads fear better than any man alive. So yes, I let you search this room. I knew you would, from the first night, the way a person cannot stop touching a sore tooth. I let you find it, because your terror tonight is the last thing that makes the trap look true. And there it was. The fracture she had felt coming for weeks arrived all at once, and it did not come from Sung-ho, or from Junho, or from any man over any wall. It came from the one person she had let herself need. You let me spend 3 weeks afraid of the wrong thing, she said, and her voice did not rise, which was worse. You watched me lie awake. You watched me suspect a good man. You kissed me and let me build something in the ruins with you, and the whole time I was a piece on your board after all. She laughed once, without any humour in it, and the sound scared her. My father was right to be afraid of your family. You do not save people. You arrange them. Jae-hyun did not defend himself. That was the thing that undid her in the end. A guilty man argues. He simply stood in the bare room and took it, jaw tight, eyes not leaving her face, and let her be right. Because she was. That is who I was raised to be, he said finally, low. I'm trying to be something else. I'm failing at it in real time in front of you tonight. He took one step toward her and stopped when she flinched. But hear the one true thing under all of it, Naledi. The trap is real, and it springs tonight, and when it does, Baek Sung-ho will have committed a crime we can prove, in front of witnesses, and the man threatening the woman you love, and the friend you love, will be finished. I did a cold thing to buy that. I will not insult you by pretending it was warm, but it was to keep you alive. Outside, far down the black water, an engine cut out where no engine should have been. Junho was gone from the doorway before Naledi had registered the sound, moving through the dark house with that terrible economy, and Jae-hyun's whole body changed. The lover gone, the boss returned, and he had her by the wrist and was pulling her low and fast toward the interior of the house. He came, Jae-hyun breathed. Early. Stay behind me and do exactly what I say. What happened over the next hour, Naledi would never be able to tell in order. She remembered the dark. She remembered the flat professional sounds that were nothing like the movies, brief and final. She remembered Junho's voice from somewhere ahead of them saying, clear, and then not clear, and then a silence that went on too long. She remembered Jae-hyun putting his body between her and a doorway without a single second of hesitation, as if it were the most natural arithmetic in the world. His life for hers, decided long ago. And she remembered, at the very end of it, standing in the ruined kitchen as grey dawn came up over the water, and watching them bring Baek Sung-ho out of the pines in handcuffs that were not the law's, alive, caught, finished, exactly as a dead man had planned it years before. It was over. The empire was saved. Except that it was not over, and some cold instinct in her had known it would not be that simple, because the trap had caught Sung-ho for what he did tonight, on this dock, but it had not touched the case. The inquiry still stood. The thing that could dissolve the Yoon Empire in a courtroom was still filed, still moving, and the only thing on earth that could kill it was still exactly what it had been on the first night in the rain. One memory, one witness. Her. They took her to the city 3 days later to testify. She had agreed. After everything, she had agreed. Because Sung-ho in handcuffs was not the same as Sung-ho beaten, and his lawyers were carrying the case forward without him, and the only way to end the threat to Jae-hyun and to Ayana and to the fragile, impossible thing she had built by a fire was to walk into that room and finally say aloud what she had sworn a dead man she never saw. The night before, she and Jae-hyun did not fight. They did not resolve anything either. They sat together in the dark of a different safe room in the city, not touching, the fracture still between them, but the war outside larger than the fracture. And near midnight, she finally told him the whole thing. What she had seen through the gap in the study door 7 years ago. All of it. And as she said it out loud for the first time in her life, watching his face, she understood the shape of what she was about to do, and the understanding turned her to stone. Because the thing she had seen, the thing that proved the crime, the thing that would clear the Yoon Empire and finish Sung-ho's case forever, was her own father. It was Baraka Zawadi, in that study, 7 years ago, confessing the original crime to Yoon Sang-chul in exchange for his family's rescue. Sang-chul had not saved a bankrupt stranger out of mercy. He had bought the one witness to a killing, cleared her father's debts to bury her father's guilt, and left instructions that if the empire ever needed saving, the same witness could be made to testify that the crime had been committed, without ever being made to say who truly committed it, unless someone in that courtroom knew the right question to ask. And the lady, sitting in the dark on the eve of her testimony, finally understood the trap that had been built around her before she was ever collected from a rainy street. To save the man she loved, she would have to tell the truth about that night. And the truth about that night did not only bury Baek Sung-ho, it buried her father. She did not sleep that night. She sat by the window of the city safe room and watched the hard electric glow of a sleepless city, and turned the impossible thing over and over, looking for the seam in it, the loophole, the version where she did not have to choose. There was none. She could stay silent and let Sung-ho's lawyers dissolve the Yoon Empire in that courtroom, and lose Jae-hyun, and leave Ayana inside the reach of whatever came next. Or she could speak the truth and save all of it, and in the same breath brand her own dead-tired father, the man who had wept on the bare floor of an emptied house, a killer, in a public record that would outlive them both. She thought about her father as he was now, older, quieter, living small in a rented room across the city. A man who had spent 7 years believing he had bought his family a second chance. He did not know she knew. He had never once spoken of that night. And she understood, sitting there in the dark, that Yoon Sang-chul had done something crueler than mercy and kinder than punishment all at once. He had let a guilty man live as though he were forgiven, and had kept the receipt in his daughter's memory, to be cashed on the day the empire needed it. At some point before dawn, Jae-hyun came and sat on the floor near her chair, not touching her, not asking, simply there, the way he had been on the dock the first night. She did not tell him. She could not make her mouth form the shape of what she now had to do to him, to herself, to a man neither of them could save. She only reached down in the grey dark and put her hand in his hair, once, the way you touch something you were about to lose, and let him think it was forgiveness. The next morning, they called her name in the great cold room, and the Lady Zawadi rose to her feet with the whole weight of it pressing down on her, knowing that the moment she opened her mouth, she would save an empire and destroy the last clean thing she had left, and that there was no version of the truth that did not cost her everything. She walked to the front of the room. She placed her hand where they told her to place it. She lifted her eyes and found Jae-hyun's across that terrible distance, and she saw in his face that he did not know. He did not know what she had only understood at midnight. He did not know that his father's rescue had a second blade in it, aimed at her. They asked her to state, for the record, what she had witnessed on the night in question. Naledi opened her mouth. If you need to know what her testimony does to this empire, and to the man she loves, and to her own father, comment part 2, and I will bring it.